It's a pleasure to welcome you today to a presentation of the ISA report on the global status of commercialized biotech GM crops in 2010, a year which marks the 15th anniversary of the first commercial plantings in 1996. My name is Clive James. I am the founder and chair of ISA and the author of the report. This year, the ISA report was launched from Brazil, widely considered to be the engine of economic growth in Latin America and an emerging world leader in biotech crops. In 2010, Brazilian farmers increased their biotech crop plantings by 4 million hectares, more than any other country in the world. There are three components of this presentation. First, we look at adoption of biotech crops over the last 15 years, as well as growth between 2009 and 2010. I will share with you a global overview and a snapshot of biotech crops in Brazil. Second, we will examine the impact of biotech crops, with a focus on productivity, sustainability, and climate change. And finally, I will speculate about what the future holds for biotech crops, more specifically the next 5 years, 2011 to 2015, which will complete the second decade of commercialization of biotech crops, 2006 to 2015. The year 2015 also happens to be the Millennium Development Goal, the MDG, a year when, as a global society, we have pledged to cut poverty and hunger by 50%. An enormous task to which I hope biotech crops will make a significant contribution. The year 2010 was a momentous year of progress for biotech crops globally, and I am cautiously optimistic about the next 5 years, 2011 to 2015. Let me begin by acknowledging the two European co-sponsors of the report we are presenting today. Ibercaja, the Spanish bank headquartered in the biotech maize-growing region of Spain, and the Fondazione Bussolera Branca of Italy, which promotes the development and dissemination of knowledge about science and technology. As a charitable organization, ISA greatly appreciates the sponsorship of these two European philanthropic foundations to facilitate the open sharing of knowledge on biotech crops to aid decision-making by global society. It is important to note that ISA, the International Service for the Acquisition of Agri-Biotech Applications, is a pro-choice organization which provides scientists, policymakers, and farmers of all sizes worldwide with access to knowledge about modern technology whilst respecting the rights to choose the technology, be it conventional, organic, or biotech, that best suits their needs. During 2010, biotech crops reached several important milestones. The most notable highlight was that the accumulated biotech crop plantings exceeded for the first time 1 billion hectares. It's hard to imagine that in just 15 years, farmers worldwide have planted biotech crops on an area larger than either China, that is 956 million hectares, or the US, that is 937 million hectares. The growth in hectarage is quite impressive. In 2010, we registered double-digit growth over 2009 of 10% or 14 million hectares. Notably, this is the second largest increase in 15 years, bringing the total global plantings to 148 million hectares. Remarkably, between 1996 and 2010, we've seen an 87-fold increase in hectarage, making biotech crops the fastest adopted crop technology in the history of modern agriculture, and signifying that biotech crops are here to stay. On the 15th anniversary of the commercialization of biotech crops, we saw record progress on several other major fronts, which I'd like to highlight for you now. 2010 saw the number of countries planting biotech crops soar from 25 to 29. It is worth noting that 19 were developing countries compared with only 10 industrial countries. About 59% of the world's population now live in the 29 countries which are planting biotech crops commercially. 3 new countries planted biotech crops for the first time in 2010, and 1 country resumed plantings. New planters included Pakistan and Myanmar, which planted Bt cotton. Sweden, the first Scandinavian country to plant biotech crops, planted the Amflora potato with high-quality starch for industrial production and animal feed. Germany also planted Amflora and rejoined the 7 European countries planting biotech crops in 2010. As the trajectory of the red line on the chart illustrates, developing countries which planted 48% of global biotech crops in 2010 are on track to soon overtake industrial countries in total hectares. The industrial countries are represented by the blue line. We expect this crossover to occur before 2015. Indeed, in 2010, developing countries increased biotech crop plantings at a much higher rate of 17%, or 10.3 million hectares, compared to only 5%, or 3.8 million hectares, in industrial countries. As a result of the consistent and substantial economic, environmental, and welfare benefits offered by biotech crops, an additional 1.4 million farmers adopted the technology in 2010. This brings the total number of farmers planting biotech crops in 2010 to a record 15.4 million worldwide. Remarkably, more than 90%, or 14.4 million, were small, resource-poor farmers in developing countries, often planting the equivalent of only 1/2 hectare. These farmers are some of the poorest people in the world, and importantly, biotech crops are helping alleviate their poverty. Another milestone reached in 2010 was that for the first time, the top 10 biotech crops all grew more than 1 million hectares each. Countries highlighted in this slide include the 5 principal developing countries from all 3 continents growing biotech crops. They are Brazil, Argentina, India, China, and South Africa. With a combined population of 2.7 billion people, or 40% of the global population, these 5 countries planted 63 million hectares of biotech crops in 2010. That's equivalent to 43% of the global total. This provides a very stable base and foundation for further growth. These 5 nations, particularly China, Brazil, and India, are driving biotech crop adoption in the developing world by creating strong political will and investing substantial new research and development funding for biotech crops in both the public and the private sector. It is important to note that biotech crops now have a well-established foothold in each of the 3 continents of the South. Around the globe, biotech crops saw unusually strong growth in 2010. Australia's biotech crops recovered from a multi-year drought with the largest proportional year-on-year increase of 184%. It was ironic that it was floods, not drought, that caused damage in Australia in January this year. Burkina Faso had the 2nd largest proportional increase of biotech crop hectarage of any country, an increase of 126%. In India, stellar growth continued, with 6.3 million farmers growing 9.4 million hectares of Bt cotton, equivalent to an 86% adoption rate. In 2010, Mexico, the center of biodiversity for maize, successfully conducted the first field trials of Bt and herbicide-tolerant maize. In 2010, a record 8 European Union countries grew Bt maize and Amflora, a high-quality starch potato. Notably, Amflora is the EU's first approval for planting in 13 years. Soybean continued to be the world's most dominant biotech crop, and herbicide tolerance the most dominant trait. Stack traits are an increasingly important feature of biotech crops. Whereas the US has the largest hectarage of stack traits, 8 of the 11 countries planting biotech crops with stack traits in 2010 were developing nations. The fastest growing component of stacked maize in the USA was triple stacks, conferring resistance to 2 pests plus herbicide tolerance. Double stacks with pest resistance and herbicide tolerance were also the fastest growing component of biotech maize in the Philippines in 2010, increasing from 338,000 hectares to 411,000 hectares, a 22% increase. Biotech maize, named Smart Stacks, was released in the USA and Canada in 2010, with 8 genes conferring pest resistance and herbicide tolerance. Future stack crop products will comprise both agronomic input traits for pest resistance, herbicide tolerance and drought tolerance, as well as output traits such as high omega-3 oil in soybean or enhanced provitamin A in golden rice. As I mentioned earlier, Brazil is one of the key nations driving biotech crop development in Latin America and saw the world's largest increase in biotech crop production, with an additional 4 million hectares planted to biotech crops in 2010. Let me briefly share with you an overview of Brazil's ascent as a biotech crop superpower. In 2010, Brazil retained and strengthened its position as the second largest grower of biotech crops in the world, now planting 17% of all biotech crops globally. Biotech crops in Brazil in 2010 were estimated to occupy 25.4 million hectares. This is an increase of 4 million hectares, the largest absolute increase in any country in the world for the second year running, and equivalent to 19% increase over 2009. Since 1990, Brazil doubled annual grain production while increasing cropland by just 27%. This increase in productivity is the result of improved technology, better agronomic practices, as well as deployment of higher yielding, improved varieties and hybrids. Thus, the comparative advantage of the new, more cost-effective and highly productive biotech crops is very important for Brazil, even though it is the only country in the world with up to 100 million hectares of new land with water that it can bring into production. Brazil will use its increased production to meet its own increasing domestic demand for grain, as well as that of increasing export markets, particularly in Asia and more specifically China. From a historical perspective, the watershed moment in Brazil's adoption of biotech crops came in March 2005, with the Brazilian Congress's approval of a biosafety bill. This bill provided for the first time a legal framework to facilitate the approval and adoption of biotech crops in Brazil. The bill allowed for the first time official sale of commercial certified Roundup Ready soybean seed and the approved use of Bt cotton. Notably, to date, Brazil has approved 27 biotech crops, with 8 expeditiously approved in 2010 alone. The speed and effectiveness of the system has increased timely access to technology and will allow continued growth as Brazil invests in infrastructure to support that growth. In 13 years, the economic benefits captured by Brazilian farmers and industry is estimated at US dollars 3.6 billion. Of this total, soybeans, the first biotech crop to be deployed, had the largest share of the total benefits at 78%. Biotech maize, first adopted in 2008, already accounts for 18%, while biotech cotton accounts for 4%. Brazil is actively working through partnerships in Africa to share the story of its success and assist with knowledge and technology transfer. In summary, Brazil, in a relatively short time of 6 years, has already become a world leader in adoption of biotech crops and is emerging as the engine of growth in Latin America. Biotech crops are especially important for Brazil because they offer an enormous new untapped potential in the remaining years of the second decade of commercialization. In the near term, there are opportunities for significant expansion of biotech soybean, maize and cotton, and also with adoption of new biotech crops such as sugarcane and beans. As adoption of biotech crops advances globally, adherence to good farming practices with biotech crops, such as crop rotations and resistant management, is a must, as it has been during the first decade. Now let us look at the impact of biotech crops globally, including the positive ramifications on sustainability, which includes hunger and poverty alleviation, as well as the implications for the environment and climate change. In 1987, the United Nations World Commission on the Environment and Development defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Since their introduction in 1996, biotech crops have been contributing to sustainability and helping to mitigate the effects of climate change on 5 important fronts. First, biotech crops contribute to food, feed and fiber security and self-sufficiency, including more affordable food by increasing productivity and economic benefits sustainably at the farm level. Biotech crops generated economic gains at the farm level of US dollars 65 billion during the period 1996 to 2009, with less than half due to reduced production costs, that means less plowing, fewer pesticide sprays and less labor, and just over half due to substantial yield gains of 229 million metric tons. Second, biotech crops help save land because they make every hectare of land cultivated more productive. This helps in precluding deforestation and protecting biodiversity in forests and other in situ biodiversity sanctuaries. An estimated 13 million hectares of tropical forest, rich in biodiversity, are lost in developing countries every year. Now, if the 229 million tons of additional food, feed and fiber produced from 1996 to 2009 had not been produced by biotech crops, an additional 75 million hectares of conventional crops would have been required to produce the same tonnage. Third, biotech crops contribute to the alleviation of poverty and hunger. Increasing the income of small, resource-poor farmers contributes directly to the alleviation of poverty affecting 70% of the world's poorest people. Biotech cotton and maize already have made significant increases to the incomes of 14.4 million poor farmers in 2010. Of special significance is biotech rice, which has the potential to benefit 250 million poor rice households in Asia. Now that's equivalent to 1 billion beneficiaries who grow rice on less than half a hectare on average. My hope is that the global biotech crop community will work diligently over the next 5 years to help maximize biotech crops' role in the meeting of the Millennium Development Goal of a 50% reduction in world poverty by 2015. Fourth, biotech crops are reducing agriculture's environmental footprint. Progress to date includes a significant reduction in pesticides, saving on fossil fuels, decreasing CO2 emissions through less ploughing, and better conservation of soil and moisture through no-till application of herbicide tolerance and increasing water usage efficiency in crops. From 1996 to 2009, biotech crops saved 393 million kilograms of pesticides, equivalent to a 9% reduction. The first biotech maize hybrids with a degree of drought tolerance are expected to be commercialized by 2012 in the USA. And more importantly, the first tropical drought tolerance hybrids are expected to be introduced by 2017 in sub-Saharan Africa. Drought tolerance also has been incorporated in other crops, including wheat, which has performed well in initial trials in Australia, with the best lines yielding up to 20% more than their conventional counterparts. Fifth, biotech crops are helping mitigate climate change and reducing greenhouse gases. In 2009 alone, reduced use of fossil-based fuels associated with fewer insecticide and herbicide sprays saved an estimated 1.3 billion kilograms of carbon dioxide, equivalent to a reduction in the number of cars on the roads by approximately 500,000. Savings from conservation tillage for biotech crops led to an additional soil carbon sequestering equivalent in 2009 to 16.3 billion kilograms of CO2. That's equivalent to removing 7.2 million cars off the road. Thus, in 2009, the combined permanent and additional savings through sequestering was equivalent to a saving of 17.6 billion kilograms of CO2, or removing 8 million cars from the road, according to a 2011 study done by Brooks and Barfoot. In summary, biotech crops are already making important contributions to the sustainability of agriculture and are significant tools in mitigating the challenges of climate change and global warming. The potential for their future role in addressing climate change-related issues is enormous. If we consider the ISA 2005 prediction that we would double the number of countries, hectarage and farmers between 2006 and 2015, we have made great progress. At the midpoint in 2010, we are on track and already halfway toward the 2015 prediction, with 29 countries, 15 million farmers and 150 million hectares in 2010. I estimate that about 12 additional countries will adopt biotech crops by 2015, bringing the number of biotech crop countries globally to approximately 40. We expect the new countries to include up to 3 or 4 from each of the regions of Asia, West Africa, East Southern Africa, with fewer from Latin and Central America and Western and Eastern Europe. Perhaps in no continent is the need for biotech crops more urgent and their adoption and acceptance more challenging than Africa. But importantly, there is now a lead country commercializing biotech crops in each of the three principal regions of the continent of Africa. South Africa in southern and eastern Africa, Burkina Faso in West Africa, and Egypt in North Africa. All three countries registered significant growth in biotech crops in 2010. The impressive increase of over 100% in Bt cotton, farmed by 80,000 farmers in 2010 in Burkina Faso, is of strategic importance for neighboring countries like Mali and Togo, and more broadly for the African continent. This broad geographical coverage in Africa is of strategic importance in that it allows the three adopting countries to become role models in their respective regions, and for more African farmers to become practitioners of biotech crops and to be able to benefit directly from learning by doing, which has proven to be such an important feature in the success of Bt cotton in China and India. Globally, there is considerable potential for increasing the biotech adoption of the four current large hectarage biotech crops: maize, soybean, cotton, and canola, which collectively represented almost 150 million hectares in 2010, compared with a global potential of 315 million hectares. This leaves a balance of up to 150 million hectares as potential expansion for the four principal biotech crops alone by 2015. In the next 5 years, the timing of the deployment of commercialized biotech crops such as rice and drought tolerance as a trait are seminal catalysts for the further adoption of biotech crops globally. The decision to delay biotech herbicide-tolerant wheat in North America 4 years ago is being revisited, as it becomes evident that conventional wheat is failing to compete profitably with biotech maize and soybean. Many countries are now fast-tracking the development of a range of traits in wheat, including drought tolerance, disease resistance, and grain quality, with the first biotech wheat expected to be ready for commercialization by about 2017. By far, the most important new biotech crop nearing commercial approval and adoption is biotech rice. Not only is it the most important food crop in the world, it is also the food crop of the poor, and furthermore, it feeds half of humanity. Golden rice for vitamin A deficient rice-eating populations is expected to be available in 2013 in the Philippines, and thereafter in Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Vietnam. It has the potential to reduce substantially the 6,000 deaths that occur daily due to vitamin A deficiency, and can save the eyesight of hundreds of thousands of people per year. Bt rice in China could be introduced by 2014 or 2015. The potential economic and nutritional impact of Bt rice on Asia's 250 million small-scale rice-producing households, that's approximately 1 billion people, is staggering. Several medium hectarage crops are also expected to be approved by 2015, including biotech potatoes resistant to the most important disease, late blight, the cause of the Irish famine in 1845, sugarcane with improved quality and agronomic traits, disease-resistant bananas, some vegetable crops including eggplant, tomato, broccoli, and cabbage, and some pro-poor crops such as biotech cassava, sweet potato, pulses, and groundnut. The adoption of biotech crops in the next 5 years will be dependent on three factors: First, the timely implementation in developing countries of appropriate, responsible and rigorous, but not onerous, regulatory systems. Second, the critical need for strong political will and support. Third, a continuing wave of improved biotech crops that will meet the priorities of industrial and developing countries. Looking ahead 5 years, the developing world will drive adoption of biotech crops between now and 2015. And in doing so, it will help drive attainment of the Millennium Development Goal of reducing global poverty by 50% by 2015 by lifting millions of small farmers out of poverty and putting them on a path to sustainable prosperity. In closing, let me assert ISA's belief that the international community has not yet taken full advantage of the potential of biotech crops to contribute to the Millennium Development Goal in 2015. While respecting different views, ISA believes that there is an urgent need to share knowledge and demonstrate to global society the important contribution that biotech crops can make to food security and the alleviation of poverty. For 15 years, biotech crop technology has proven its ability to better nourish and enrich the world's resource-poor people. The international community must make a concerted effort to get knowledge about the new technologies into the hands of more people who can benefit from it.